Oh my goodness. All right, senior quiver, 14 through 18, 19. Follow General Mr. Dahl. Yeah. She wants Mimi now. All right, well, anyway, good to see everyone. This past weekend, I know it was, for some, it was a good time to just kind of lay around and recover. For others, you know, maybe you were bored, I don't know. But anyway, we're going to get back in the saddle and hope we're past all this nonsense. All right. So I thought tonight, since we weren't able to be here this past weekend and address some of the things that are in the Torah portion, there was something that I did want to read, and that I want to share with you something that come to mind as I was meditating on this. Thank you. All right, I want to read from chapter 14. First of all, and I think we've talked about this before, but in chapter 14, something very interesting happens, and that is, as they're going out from Egypt, the Father tells Moses and the people to turn. And I've always found that very important because, as we know, Moses had already left Egypt once before. He had gone to Midian. He'd lived at Horeb in that area for 40 years. And so when he returned to Egypt, he went back from Horeb, the point being that he knows the way from Egypt to Horeb. He's been on that road before, at least twice. And he knows that when he leads the people from Egypt, that he's to take them back to Horeb. That's established, I think, in Exodus chapter 3 or 4. So then in chapter 14, when he tells them to turn and he leads them down into a place, it's called Pehachurot, which is the mouth of the gorges, and they were to encamp by the sea before Baal Zephon. The point is he led them into a place that at the end of it is a dead end, more or less. He brings them into, from a military point of view, particularly Pharaoh's point of view, God led them into a death trap. The wilderness has shut them in. Of course, we, in retrospect, we're able to see how things turn out. We know exactly what's going on. But it seems to me that at the time, no one knew what was going on except the Almighty. Moses was following him and leading the people, but there's a point in the story in Exodus chapter 14 when they're camped by the sea, they're kind of pinned in, Pharaoh's chariots are coming down that gorge to kind of bottle them in. And people are coming to Moses and saying, were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us out into the wilderness to die? And of course, Moses says, hey, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. But interestingly, the very next verse, God says to Moses, why are you speaking to me? Tell the people to go forward. So it's always kind of in my mind's eye, I'm playing it out like this. Moses, you know, the leader, he's in control. He knows exactly what's going on. At least he leads everybody to think, you know, leaves everybody thinking he knows what's going on. And the people are worried and they're scared. And he's telling them not to be scared, not to be afraid. God's got this. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And between that statement and the next, apparently he turns around and he whispers to God, what are we going to do? Because God says, why are you talking to me? Tell the people to go forward. There's water in front of us. What are we supposed to do? And then, of course, he tells him what to do. My point is that, and again, I think I've made this point before. We've talked about this part of the Torah portion. There are times that God tells us to turn into a direction that we weren't expecting to go. He tells us to turn down into a path that we did not anticipate. None of us did. I would dare say that most of you sitting here tonight when you were first born again in the First Baptist Church on the frontage road, where, whatever it was, probably didn't see yourself sitting in this room tonight, doing the things that you do, leaving the things that you left, embracing the things that you've embraced. Would I be right? Okay. And chances are 10 years from now, hopefully we will mature to the point that we'll look back on tonight and go, wow, we've come a long way since then. But along that journey, along the way, in the process, there are times that he tells us to turn and leads us into places that from a human point of view, it looks like it's just this, how's this going to work? How's this going to work out? But then we know in the story that he causes it to work out. He performs miracles. So I want to read from chapter 14. In verse 15, then the Lord said unto Moses, why are you crying out to me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on the dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get honor upon Pharaoh and upon all of his hosts, upon his chariots, upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, I am the Lord, when I have gotten honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, that is the Egyptians. But it gave light by night to those, or to these, that is Israel, so that the one came not near the other all the night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry, and the waters were divided. So what I wanted to point out here is something Beth was reading the other morning on Shabbat, and she was just kind of talking and thinking out loud about how the angel and the pillar of cloud, how it divided the two camps, and light to one, darkness to the other. And for some reason, as I was reading this again today, that conversation she was bringing up, when she didn't think I was actually paying attention. But I was. That came back to mind, and as I was thinking about that, another story popped into my head. But before I go there, I want us to make certain we understand what's going on here. This pillar of cloud, this angel of the Lord that was in the pillar of cloud, went and the angel got between Egypt and Israel. And when it did this, when the angel did this, somehow, some way, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know that any of us could, but it provided light to Israel throughout the night, and it provided darkness to the Egyptians. And so here would be the point, it seems to me anyway. God didn't lead them into a death trap because he's not a bad general, he's a good general. But being that good general, he is also covering the movements of his armies. He's concealing the movement of his armies. He doesn't want Pharaoh to know what's going on just yet. Pharaoh thinks that Israel has been led into a trap, when the end result in reality is that Pharaoh and the Egyptians have been lured into a trap. And so to keep this going on as he's preparing a way of escape, if I can use that word, for the children of Israel to go through the sea, at the same time he is concealing from the Egyptians what he's doing on the other side as they make their way through the sea. It's only after they're moving through the sea that this cloud and this fire that separated the two was removed, so that Pharaoh then pursues them into the sea. So that's the main point I wanted to make here as far as the story in the Bible. That not only did God lead Israel to their deliverance, not only did he lure Egypt into a trap, but as these things are unfolding, God is concealing what he's doing from the enemy, but he's illuminating the way for his people. Here's why I think that's important for us to recall. Because if he's done it once, he'll do it again. You believe that? Now, I want to read you something that's a little closer to our time. And it's not exactly the same. There are some distinctions, but there are some very interesting similarities. I'm going to read to you from a book we've talked about before, The Light and the Glory. Is it all right if I just read some to you? I was going to do it anyway, but I thought I'd ask you. Okay. So you know that the Declaration of Independence was signed when? Oh, my word. Younger people, help them out. What? No. 1776. I heard 75, 77, and everything else. Who said 76? Okay, all right. Y'all just did it a lot quieter than everybody else. This is true, too. It could be that my ears are stuffed up. All right, what day in 1776? Anybody?
I said Wednesday.
What's the date in 1776? July 4th? Who said that? You said that? Wrong. July 2nd. July 2nd, 1776. It was first proclaimed or declared on July 4th, 1776. I was just having a little fun. I thought, all right. So July 2nd, the Declaration of Independence is adopted in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On July 4th, it's declared. So the Americans are celebrating, we're independent, all those kinds of good things. However, on the morning of August 22nd, 15,000 British troops landed on the southeast shore of Brooklyn without opposition. 3 days later, they were reinforced by an additional 5,000 Hessians. Facing them were barely 8,000 Americans under Washington, half of them untrained. In fact, only 3 weeks before, there had been less than 5,000. But in response to a sincere appeal from Washington revealing how desperate the American plight was, Connecticut's governor, Jonathan Trumbull, had called for 9 more regiments of volunteers in addition to the 5 that Connecticut had already sent. In other words, the Continental Army was on the western end of Long Island, a little place called Brooklyn Heights at the time. And it was not far from here where all these other British soldiers landed. And basically, the American army was right there all together in one place. And so in 5 days, the British had nearly surrounded the Americans just north of the Flatbush region when the order for attack was given on August 27th. The Americans' left and center were overwhelmed and fell back to the final defensive perimeter around the northern tip of Brooklyn. The right, under William Alexander, known as Lord Stirling because of his Scottish ancestry, was cut off and trapped. While Stirling and the Delawares held a ridge, their colors flying, 5 times the Marylanders flung themselves at Cornwallis's lines, trying to break through to rescue them. The last time they almost succeeded, but fresh British reinforcements stopped them, and though the British reported that Stirling, personally leading his men, fought like a wolf. So Washington and his generals had observed that this entire action through field telescopes, and several of his generals had speculated that Stirling would give up his hopeless position without a fight. And when it was over, according to an eyewitness, General Washington wrung his hands in anguish and cried out, "Good God, what brave fellows I must this day lose." So again, just to kind of make sure everybody understands what we're dealing with here, in July of 1776, America has declared its independence from Britain. Not a month, or just a little over a month later, British forces are on Long Island preparing to wipe out the very weak and poorly positioned American forces. In other words, the revolution could be over as soon as it got started. All that afternoon, the Americans held their breath, waiting for the final British assault, which would surely finish them. They were outnumbered by more than 3 to 1, low on powder, as always, and would soon have struck the British fleet in the mouth of the East River, and soon would have the British fleet in the mouth of the East River at their back. Dark thoughts must have gone through the minds of many of them. It had been a noble, even glorious revolution, for there had been days of glory. No matter what happened in the next few hours, the British could never take away from them the memory of Lexington and Concord, of Bunker Hill, Fort Sullivan. Freedom, it had been a cause worth dying for. But now they had to face the grim reality of how great the odds were against them. Many must have thought that they were mad to have even considered that they had the faintest chance of success. Put your trust in God, their ministers had said. He is with us. He will see us through. Well, where was he now? In other words, I can hear a faint echo of, were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us out here into the wilderness to die? And so they waited, and they waited, and waited, and never knew that God was with them all the time. For Howe, that is the British general, against all military logic, was once again failing to follow up his all too obvious advantage. And this was not a dull general. His surrounding maneuver of the night before had been brilliantly conceived and flawlessly executed, taking the Americans entirely by surprise. As afternoon became evening, and the night wore on silently and peacefully, it gradually became apparent that Howe was not going to attack. Unbelievable. A miracle, a few would begin to say. Yet Howe's unaccountable delay was only the opening curtain on what would be the most amazing episode of divine intervention in the Revolutionary War. The morning of August 28th dawned overcast and threatening, but quiet. There was still no movement from the British positions. All that day, the Americans continued to wait, tense, exhausted, for the inevitable barrage that would precede the final action. But the British guns remained silent. In the late afternoon, a cold, pelting rain began to fall and kept on falling into the night, soaking the tentless, lightly clothed, and hungry Americans. But the rain came on a northeast wind, and that wind prevented Howe's fleet from entering the East River. Isn't that interesting? And now Washington had a plan. This is not in the book, but Washington, just like all the rest of us, strengths and weaknesses, warts and flaws. He lost more battles than he won. And so in that respect, people could say he was a poor general. However, in this particular situation, and there are others, if you read history like I do and like others do, you will see that maybe he was not the greatest strategist, and he was really trying to do something with both hands tied behind his back, quite frankly. But he was intelligent enough to see an opportunity, and when he saw an opportunity, he was brave enough and courageous enough to seize the opportunity that was before him. So this situation has presented him an opportunity. That wind has kept British ships from coming up the East River that would cut him off. And so he sees that maybe we have a chance at something here. All right. He had a plan. It was a desperate gamble, dependent on so many unlikely intangibles that it hardly deserved to be called a plan. But it was better than a suicidal defense, and surrender was out of the question. If only God's grace continued to favor them. And so he called a council of war. He informed his senior officers that he had decided to take the entire army off Brooklyn by small boat. They would rejoin the main body of American forces at the foot of Manhattan Island behind Knox's major batteries. Immediately, his generals pointed out that it was a full mile across the East River. All of them knew what the British fleet would do to a flotilla of small boats filled with infantry the moment they spotted them. Better to die in the trenches, at least there they could sell themselves dearly. But Washington had made up his mind. Even so, in his heart, he must have been praying much, for only God could prevent the enemy from discovering what they were up to. The first thing they needed was boats and men to handle them, by coincidence. The last reinforcements to have come over from Manhattan were John Glover's company of Marbleheaders. All of these were expert oarsmen who had practically grown up in small boats on the shores of the Massachusetts Bay. Washington now called upon them to locate the small boats they would need, and they would soon be joined by the 27th Massachusetts, Salem men with the same skills. And all night long, these men made the treacherous 2-mile round trip. At first, they had to fight the wind and stormy chop. Then after midnight, the wind died away, so they had to quietly glide through the still waters. Dipping their oars deftly and silently into the water, they pulled them through without a wash and raised them out clean, ready for another stroke. And while the flat calm enabled them to take much heavier loads, so that the gunwales were barely above the surface, the danger was much greater now, for there was no storm or rain to cover any accidental noise. Now they could ill afford the squabbles which had broken out earlier in the evening as the men had waited in line to be taken off the beach. The officers were diligent to shut off any argument in its earliest stages. I hope we heard that part. How important it will be not to be squabbling in times such as this. All right? The impossible evacuation continued. With the clearing of the night, it became crucial to maintain a screen of men in the front positions so that the British would not suspect a withdrawal. Shortly after 2 in the morning, however, the 2 Pennsylvania battalions under newly promoted Brigadier General Thomas Mifflin received orders, apparently from Washington, to quit their positions and to proceed to the boats forthwith. Obediently, they had done just that when their withdrawal happened to be discovered by the one man who could have known for certain that there had been a mistake, Washington himself. All night long, he had been riding along the lines and the shore, and now he quickly redressed the situation and got the Pennsylvanians back to their posts. Perhaps a full half hour had passed, during which there had not been a single defender visible anywhere on the American lines. And the night was so clear and well lit by moonlight that the enemy could be clearly seen, extending his trenches toward the American lines. The British must have been blind or blinded. And now came the greatest peril of all, dawn. As the first hints of pink began to illuminate the eastern horizons, the embarkation was far from over. At least 3 more hours would be needed to get the last man across, and the day was and the sky above was cloudless. It would be a dazzlingly clear day. Now all American eyes were fixed on the eastern sky as it began to redden, and the darkness shrank westward. And though the men remained silent, one could sense their anxiety mounting as the covering of night began to recede and leave them naked. Are y'all still with me? All right. What happened next should be told by one who saw it. So, quote, as the dawn of the next day approached, end quote, Major Ben Talmadge would write, those of us who remained in the trenches became very anxious for our own safety. And when the dawn appeared, there were several regiments still on duty. At this time, a very dense fog began to rise out of the ground and off the river, and it seemed to settle in a peculiar manner over both encampments. I recollect this peculiar providential occurrence perfectly well, and so very dense was the atmosphere that I could scarcely discern a man at 6 yards distance. We tarried until the sun had risen, but the fog remained as dense as ever, end quote. Virtually every man who kept a diary that day recorded that fog, and most of them made a point of giving the credit where it was due. The fog remained intact until the last boat with Washington in it had departed. Then it lifted, and the shocked British ran to the shore and started firing after them, but they were out of range. Nearly 8,000 men had been extricated from certain death or imprisonment without the loss of a single life. The Continental Army had suffered a severe defeat with some 1,500 casualties, yet thanks to a storm, a wind, a fog, and too many human coincidences to number, there still was a Continental Army. So, I want to go back to what the scripture says. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass in the morning, it came to pass in the morning watch, that the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, took off their chariot wheels, that they drove them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And you know the story. So the connection in my mind, as I said, there are differences. In the Bible, Israel isn't in the position that God told them to go to. He led them there. And he led them there because not only was he going to intervene on their behalf and deliver them from the hand of Pharaoh, but at the same time, he was going to destroy Pharaoh and his army so that they would never be able to lay claim to Israel again. I do find it interesting, as we said, that when the pillar of cloud and the angel came between Israel and Egypt, it provided light for one, darkness for the other, but simultaneously, as I said, it kind of concealed what was going on from the Egyptians' perspective. They didn't know what was going on the other side. It was only in the morning that they began to realize what was happening. So I guess it was that caused me to think about this story I'd read a long, long, long time ago. And here is the reason. Washington, the Continental Army, they chose the place to fight. They chose the position that they found themselves in, and they realized that it was a mistake. God didn't put them in that particular situation. But nevertheless, it seems to me that the same kind of miracle occurred for them. He didn't destroy the British Army, but he saved the Continental Army. And so, to all of those who believe that America from its very beginning is evil and wicked and is doomed and all these kinds of things, God has nothing to do with it, I'm sorry. I don't buy that for a second. Does America have problems? Absolutely. Does America have a sordid history? Absolutely. Does America have things to answer for? Absolutely. But was God involved with the formation of this country? Absolutely. And it is obvious to me that we would not have this country had it not been for things like what we just read about. All right? So, but even that, 250 years ago, that's ancient history to some, right? But again, my point is, if he did it 3,500 years ago, he'll do it again. And in some ways, I just read you an account of how he did something very similar for a group of men 250 years ago. In this particular situation, he gave them opportunity. And then they trusted him as they took that opportunity that was presented to them. And he did what only he could do. They did the things that they could do. So if he did it for them, if he did it for Moses and the children of Israel, I have to believe that he is and will do this for you and for me. So the things that we can learn from both of these situations, we'll start with Washington and his armies. It's a good idea to think before you act and not position yourself in a place where there is no line of retreat, so to speak. Let's put it this way. It's a good idea as an individual not to put ourselves in a situation that we should not be in. Be wary of those situations that are dangerous. Be wary of those situations that are going to play to our weaknesses or going to exploit our weaknesses. It's a good idea just to avoid those places altogether. You know, Washington put his army in a situation where they were very easily, cut off, and their weaknesses were easily exploited. Had it not been for this miracle, It's like the writer says, there may not have been a continental army. So what do I learn from that? That even when I'm stupid, God will help me. In fact, Paul talks about, I will paraphrase, that he's not going to give us any more than we can handle. But when these things come our way, whatever the situation is in our life, whatever scenario, whatever storm, whatever temptation, I think this is the word that Paul uses, that he's not going to put on us any more than we can handle. Now, I've been in situations before when I have said to him, you said you weren't going to put on me any more than I can handle. And I'm telling you, this is more than I can handle. But then in response to that, he gives me a little bit more to handle, because apparently he feels that I can handle a little bit more than I think I can. But Paul also said that when we find ourselves in those situations, with the temptation, God always gives us a way of escape. So I was thinking about that, and it occurs to me that if we do find ourselves in such a way, such a situation, and he does give us a way of escape, it seems that it's incumbent upon us to recognize that way of escape, to be able to discern the way of escape. Washington sees what's going on. The rain, the wind, the British are not moving, and he sees an opportunity. And he seizes that opportunity, and he lives to fight another day. And so it's important that if, and hopefully we won't find ourselves in these situations too often, but if we do, we are given the promise that he provides a way of escape. But again, it seems to me that it's incumbent upon us to recognize that and then to move and to act. A lot of things that God does for us is predicated on our responding, doing what we're supposed to be doing. Apples and oranges. Are y'all still there? Okay, all right, just making sure. Apples and oranges. God told Noah a flood was coming. Here's how it's going, what it's going to do. Here's going to be the result. And so I need you to do A, B, C. So what would have happened to Noah and his family and the human race if Noah had heard what he said, believed what he said, but did not do A, B, C? We wouldn't be here. Right, thank you. All right. Apples and oranges. There's, I think it's in Haggai chapter 2. And this is one I like to go to a lot. But he's talking to the people who are there, returned from captivity. They see Jerusalem destroyed. They see the temple has been leveled. And they're looking at what a pile of rubble, and he causes them to recollect what it used to look like before it was a pile of rubble, what it used to be when it was a temple and a city. And he says, how many of you remember what it used to be? And then he says, but look, I'm still with you, and I'm going to be with you, but I want you to do the work. I'm going to be with you, just like I was with your ancestors when they came up out of the land of Egypt, but it's important that you do the work. So he will give us grace, he will give us favor, he will give us an avenue where we can get to the objective that we're supposed to get to, but it's still incumbent upon us to seize the opportunity that he places before us. So I hope that what connected in my mind, I'm able to articulate now. But there, in the Bible and in history, we see how God will, whether he leads people to be in a very precarious situation or whereby our own choices and actions, we find ourselves in a precarious situation. If we look to him, he will give us a way of escape and deliverance. All right. So in our day and time, pardon me, we know that schemes and plots and plans are being hatched. We know that people are meeting behind closed doors, and they have their schemes and they have their plans and all of the things that they want to do in this world. And here you and I are, as God's people, sitting right in the middle of this very, what's the word that Paul used? My mind's going blank. Well, I'll go back to the word precarious. We find ourselves in this very, very evil time. And in the process, it seems to me that we may find ourselves, individually and corporately, we may at times find ourselves in what seems to be, well, were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us out into this wilderness to die? We may find ourselves in places that God has led us to that seems to our eye to be the end of the road. There's no way this can work. How is this going to happen? But we have to remember that if he's led us there, he didn't lead us there to leave us there. Right? Amen. On the other hand, if we find ourselves in a situation, we made choices, we went headlong into something, made decisions, and when we come to our senses, we realize, oops, I shouldn't have done that. I've really gotten myself in a mess. We also need to remember that even in those situations, if we'll humble ourselves, if we'll look to him, we'll turn to him, I do believe that he will make a way of escape. He will make a way of deliverance even in those kinds of situations. And I know that I'm sure none of you have ever done this, but I have at times made decisions very hastily and found myself in a situation I would rather not be in. And I have tried to work it out on my own and made things worse. But I've also found that there are those times when I've stopped, humbled myself, and just said, will you help me? He does. But it's still very important that I recognize those opportunities that he's presenting before me that lead to my deliverance, my salvation, my escape, whatever word you want to use. All right? So, not too deep, I hope. Not too much reading, I hope. But these are the thoughts that I had on my mind today. And I'm just hopeful that maybe it was beneficial for somebody. Maybe it's something that somebody needed to hear. So I'm not going to elaborate and, draw things out. I don't have that much energy right now, quite frankly. But anyway, just some thoughts to ponder. And so if anybody has anything that they would like to add to that, I would be very happy for you to do that because it's only 8:15. All right, well, good night. Brandon? Oh, Marlene.
That's a very interesting story that you read. So last week, like every single day, I had texts coming in, telephone calls coming in. This one's sick, that one's sick, this one's sick, that one's sick. Going down every single day. And I thought, there's something going on here. But it's something going on more than just people are getting sick. And so when you called the day off on Saturday, we were forced to take a day off. And not only were people sick, but snow and ice came to keep people in their house. So throughout the weekend, we had a lot of time to be able to really go in and see, okay, Lord, what are you doing here? And throughout the weekend, I was getting text messages. People were calling. I feel like the Lord gave me this. I feel like the Lord gave me that. By Monday, after we were forced to stay in the house on Shabbat and Sunday for the most part, I started getting text messages. Oh, all of a sudden, we're good. All of a sudden, we're good. I don't know why, but because people were saying that they expected to be sick because the last time they got sick, they were sick a long time, and it seemed to be running that course. But then all of a sudden on Monday, people started, just getting well again. And so I think that's all I'm going to say right now.
Well,
This is in light of what you read.
I think that there are times, that stuff is going around and you get sick, and then there are times that it's so prevalent, overwhelming, that it almost seems that this is more than just people getting sick, There must be a reason behind it, and there must be a purpose in it, and I'm choosing to believe that. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I got it all figured out, But if he allows things like this to touch our life, it has to serve some kind of a purpose, Maybe we'll figure out or be able to see what that is later on down the road, But yeah, I thought this is a little bit out of the ordinary. At least it seems to me, And I'm just going to kind of go with the flow here. If I've told this story before, please forgive me for repeating myself. But there were many, many years ago when Beth and I were living in Florida, Brandon was probably her age, maybe even younger. But Beth and I were part of this church, and fairly new to the church. And we were in a play, and I played Peter, and you were Mary, I think, if I recall correctly. And we had a performance. This was a Saturday night. And we both just took very, very, very ill. I mean, it was just crazy how fast it came on us. To the degree that I had to crawl to our neighbor's house to see if she could come watch Brandon. And we sat there. Hey, baby, I know I'll talk to you later. But we were very, very sick, could hardly lift our heads up. But we had a church that was praying for us. And they took us, they came and got us. They carried us and put us in a car and took us to the church. And when we came into this fellowship hall, all these people had assembled and they were praying. And they didn't say a word to us, but they put us in a chair. And I kid you not, when they started praying for me just like that, I went from being completely, I can't even hold my head up, to just, I'm perfectly well. It didn't happen for her immediately. It was later. And I've never understood why. One, it was immediate, and the other, it wasn't. But I guess the reason I'm telling the story is all of these things that have happened to us and all these things that are happening to us are things that we're going to draw on in the future, things that we're going to be reminded of in the future, things wax on, wax off. We may not understand it right now, but when the battle comes, there are things that we've gone through, things that we've endured that we're going to call on. He's going to call these things to our mind, and we're going to remember stories like this to know that when we find ourselves in a very, very precarious situation, we need to be paying attention, notice what's going on around us, and watch for his hand to start to work. Anyway, I don't know why I shared that story, but maybe there's a reason. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to share tonight? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I want, when we first started coming here, almost 2 years ago, and this was about the size. It wasn't a lot of people here. It was a very close-knit group. And it was wonderful to see family, and then it exploded in growth. So what happened this last week, I want to say Marlene will not, and I will, because I can be that way. She called a 3-day fast among those who would pray. And I saw the heart of this congregation come together. A new congregation, not the one you started off with, but the one that God had grown. And they bound together. They lifted one another up. They lifted you up. They lifted the leadership up. And under her leadership, she held a rally cry that God is doing something, and he's allowing this to touch us for a reason. Let's find out what's going on and come against this corporate attack. I think it's because we're getting ready for promotion, personally. I just choose to look at the good side of this thing. But I wanted to report that from my place, I wasn't sick for very long. I missed because it wasn't a good idea to come. But it wasn't very long. But I saw a body bond together. The new people who weren't here 2 years ago. People that were here just a few weeks and a couple of months. Bonded together in prayer. And you see a result of it. And you will be, what was the word? Ebenezer, a pillar to look back and say, God moved there when we were under attack corporately. Yeah. And I think it's because, there is a promotion coming. And the enemy knows quite well what's going on here. But I'm completely convinced that Father only allows things from the enemy to touch us, to build our character, to strengthen us. Joffrey brought a great message of character before the battle. It's very timely. Everything is very, very timely, and I'm very blessed to be here.
Thank you, Clifford. I don't know who raised their hand, but I want you to give the microphone to Heather. Heather, do you know what I want you to talk about?
What I put on Slack?
What?
Was it what I put on Slack?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when everybody got sick and we had to cancel, he was asking the staff, what we thought, what our opinion was. And Danny and I have been reading in Nehemiah that morning. And so I said, Danny, this is really looking to me like it's paralleling here, because here this man has come in and he's rallied the troops and he's got them all working on to restore this wall. He's brought them all together. They're working on this wall. The enemy is laughing at them because he doesn't think they're going to get anywhere. But once they got to where the wall was almost closed, that's when the enemy took a stance against them and said, maybe they are going to accomplish something. So right as they were about to get that wall completed, that's when the attack came. And so I told him, I feel like Jacob's tent is in this, Nehemiah moment where we were building the wall and we're just about to break through and get that together. And he's taking notice on us now. And we had gained all this momentum, at the Hanukkah conference and right after. And we gained all this momentum. And he's like, I don't really like that. I don't like what they're doing together. Now they're getting in unity and they're building something. And that's when the attack came on them. So that's kind of where I was thinking that we were at in all of this, because it seemed like we were just about there. He wanted to slow that momentum down and keep us apart from one another.
Thank you. I thought that was, it encouraged me. It encouraged me because, look, people get sick. People have always gotten sick. People will get sick. It happens. I know that. And I try to be one who is very hesitant to spiritualize everything. But then there are those times when it seems to me to be beyond just the normal everyday in and out. And then that's what you were more or less saying, Marlene, right? Okay. And then, Clifford, you're bringing out what you saw in response to that. So I don't want it to be that every time something negative happens, the devil did this, but then there are those times that I do believe the adversary does come against us or, God's people. And I do believe that there are times that God allows that to happen because it does provoke us to come together, or it should provoke us to come together. It should provoke us to be quiet and listen to what the general's saying, because he might be working something out on our behalf that's going to really pay off down the road, or it is a promotion perhaps, or whatever. We'll see. But, from where I sit, and these things kind of come along, you go, what's the right thing to do? And that's why I thank you very much for your prayers for Beth and for me, and support in our decisions that we make. Somebody said this, I don't remember who it was, but it really touched me, that we're doing things as a family and not as a corporation, you know? And that really is like, well, yes, that's that's what's going on here. We're not just building another church. We're not just building another congregation. We're not just building another, what? Was it? Okay. But we're building a family. And I really am very happy to see that there are others that are recognizing that. On the other side of the coin, it forced us all to take some time off and get some rest. Yeah, it did. And some of us really needed it. All right. Anyway, anyone else have anything they'd like to add tonight?
Yeah, I had, I'm back with one of my crazy stories. But I feel like...
I tell the crazy stories
Okay.
around here. No, I'm just playing.
Well, I feel like the Father wants me to share this. And
I'm playing, Shauna.
Okay. It's actually a lot better than it would have been, because yesterday I was thinking, I'm going to have to ask for prayer at Jacob's tent. And, anyway, so this kind of goes along with what you were saying for me, but I'm a violin teacher. I work for myself, and Monday is my start date. So I have been scheduling students and, doing all this, and people keep saying, where are you located? And I keep saying, I'm finalizing that, which is my professional way of saying, basically, unfortunately. But I've been like sweating bullets, because this is like, the clock is ticking, and Monday I have people that I'm going to teach. Anyway, so on Shabbat, I was really struggling, and I listened to the broadcast rewind, and a lot of the things that you brought up tonight were similar because it was the same parashah. But the thing that stuck out to me was what you brought out about struggling with our faith with God taking care of the personal details. It's like it's easier to believe sometimes for the big miracles than it is like the little things that actually matter to us. And to me, this is something that matters to me. And it's kind of a big deal to me, but I was like, okay, I really need to have faith. Anyway, I hope that someday I get to the point where I have the faith and I don't get scared at these things, because I was scared. I was like...
You're the only one who got scared. You're the only person who gets scared of these things.
Yeah. Anyway, Tuesday night, that was last night. Last night, God provided a place for me that's crazy. It's in my budget. It's in a really good spot. It's in a good place of town. I'm sharing it with other musicians that were looking for other musicians. Like it's a crazy good thing.
Wonderful.
And I'm so happy, and I'm praising the Father because, and the big thing to me is that He continues to provide even when we don't have the trust or the faith that we should have, which I didn't. But He is good and He's faithful. So I'm thankful.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, He takes care of us even when we don't know that He's taking care of us. So glad to hear that, Shauna. Does anyone else have anything they want to share?
Hello, Mr. Brill.
How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Reading that book, it's a wonderful book. I've read all three of them. They're great. But one of the things that made me think, and I've been thinking about, the Father's been dealing with me about, is, you mentioned about remembering, you're reading history, and it makes us remember where God has, what He's done for the country, but not only for the country, but us personally, individually. So one of the things that He's been yanking my ears about, I guess, is to remember. But we tend, me personally, I'm throw myself under the bus here, that I tend to remember the bad things, my mistakes. And experiences are very, very important in our lives, because an experience in your life can either push you forward because you've learned something from a good experience and it kind of motivates you. But you also have bad experiences that instead of pushing you forward, they hold you back. And we as his people, individuals, we have to be careful with those things. When you remember, we must remember the good things, and because subconsciously we tend to do things. When you're driving from work or from house to work, you kind of do it subconsciously. How did I get here? Because we work subconsciously, and sometimes you create these habits in your life that it's not a good habit, and you're remembering those things subconsciously, and you're acting on those things instead of looking at the good stuff that the Father's provided or done for us to push us forward. So the Father's been dealing, I guess you're talking about remembering and reading that book. Let us remember the good things that the Father's done for us. And not that we're not, but I guess I'm guilty not doing that. And it holds me back from doing what the Father's asking me to do. Like Moses, I can't talk. And we have to be careful individually, because we all struggle. We all have our issues. We all have our kryptonite that we have to deal with. So just be careful with that. Let us just be diligent. And the prayer is, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence. Let not thy Holy Spirit from me. And we must daily seek him every day, to know him. Like I knew my wife, we ended up with Nathan and Janae. That's where intimacy is so vital at this time. We must fall in love with the Father again. Job is talking about, I remember, Father, remember when I was young and I was talking with you, we had this connection. Job is remembering those things because he's looking where he's at right now, but he was reflecting on the good things in his life. You might be going through some hard times and things you just don't understand, but let us remember the wonderful things that Father has done for us, and he does it every day. Case in point right here, this young lady and all of us. So I'm grateful, so grateful to be here, and thankful for you, Bill, Miss Beth, and just for starting this whole being obedient, and that trickled down, that what it has caused a ripple effect. Not only you started it, you obeyed, and look at what the Father's done in my life personally, in my family's life. And Nathan and Abby, praise God. So not only us, but everybody in here. So thank you so much, and we love y'all.
Well, thank you. We love you guys too. And I will testify that, I need to be under that bus with you, because sometimes I kind of, I was an idiot then and I was stupid there, But I've also found value in that, not to, and I agree with you, we have a tendency to let those things sometimes hold us back. I can't do this because of whatever. But I've also found that, there's a value in it if we learn, from those times that we were stupid, If I may, revert back to history here, this is one of the first, what we read about tonight was one of the first battles that the army under Washington's leadership fought and lost, and he almost lost the entire army. And he would lose more battles. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about people like Washington and others is their perseverance, in the face of all this adversity. And there are many, many other people, who would fall into this category. But since we talked about Washington a little bit tonight, but just the perseverance to not allow the mistakes to hold them back, but to be provocation to get better at what they do, and to persevere. Because later on in the fall of 1781, this same guy is going to seize an opportunity to move his entire force from the New York State area down south to Virginia and trap Lord Cornwallis in a place called Yorktown, and basically, defeat the British at Yorktown and win, a victory for the Americans because he persevered. He wasn't the greatest strategist. He wasn't the greatest tactician. But the one thing that he was is that he persevered. So all of us, we will probably make more mistakes than not in this journey, just being honest with you, myself included. But we have this advocate with the Father that he doesn't hold that mistake against us if we're ready to turn from it and to look to him to overcome it. We can grow, we can mature, because what's going to count at the end is if we're still standing, right? Not how many mistakes we made necessarily, although that's not a license to go out and make a mistake. It's just we're going, we know we've done that, but we can learn, we can grow, we can mature and then overcome those things. And at the end, still be standing, because of his grace and his spirit. So I'm with you there. I do that too, but I also want to thank you for pointing out how important it is for us to remember not the bad things that we've done, but all the wonderful things that he's done when we've been stupid, right? All right, thanks, Elsa. All right, anybody else want to share anything tonight? Yes, sir.
I just want to share a couple things, especially with what you were saying. Sometimes those bad things, when I've reflected on them, and those feelings have often given me that, where it feels like it's holding me back because, I did this, oh, that was stupid, this, why did I do that at this point in my life? But something I believe now, and this is just my belief that I felt like the Father's shown me, is that every time in those stupid things that I was doing, or that part of my life, that he was with me, he brought me through, he's got me where he's got me today, but every one of those stupid decisions that I made has given me a portion of a testimony for somebody else that's going through that same situation, and that he puts these people in front of us so that we know what it feels like to be there. We know what it feels like to make those mistakes. And we can have that compassion with them, and we can sit with them, we can talk, we can empathize for what they're feeling at that moment. So I often still hold on to, I don't let it hold me back, but I often hold those feelings that I know what it felt like, and I don't want to lose the memory of those experiences, because there's somebody else that's going to come across the path that needs to hear what he has done and how he brings us out of that. And that is what leads them to them, And on what you were talking about, Sean, I think in those troubled times and those testing moments, I had got back, I guess, the time that we were out because of January 1st of that weekend. Went to North Carolina, got back, and on Monday, it just seemed like bad thing after bad thing after bad thing, like every day. And it has been that way for almost 2.5 weeks now, where this happens and this happens. You're like, what? Is this the end? Am I doing something wrong? But there's always purpose behind it. There is always purpose behind it. We were traveling back from Athens, Tennessee, with a truck, and blew a head gasket. Okay, had to park it at a Dollar General in Riceville for over a week. Couldn't figure out how to get it back, because we drive back in my truck, and I get almost to my house, and my truck breaks down. And I'm like, come on. So we had to walk back to the house, try to figure out what's going on, do all these things. All these things are lining up, There's somebody that I know, have known for 4 years now. I've been praying for him. He's been a friend of mine, and he talks about the Father, right? But his life doesn't line up. He's just one of those people that believes and still prays, but yet not quite there, And I've known him for 4 years now. And for at least 3 of those years, I've seen it. Father's got him. He's going to get him. He's going to get him. Just keep loving on him. Keep loving on him. He's going to get them. If the truck would not have broke down that day, I would have been at work and not been there the moment that he needed prayer, at his most broken moment. And to watch how the Father orchestrates that and makes it, okay, yeah, the truck broke down. Is it the enemy that's got me, or does the Father have another purpose for it? I could have been frustrated about it and been like, oh, what is going on? What are we going to do? But rather just deal with it, and when the opportunity's there, you see it. This is what the Father had. Well, his truck breaks down at the Dollar General, and couldn't get there. Trying to fix my truck, couldn't get up there to try to fix this one. Don't know what to do. Well, we just happened to have it sitting there for a while, ended up getting up, last Wednesday, and finally got a chance to go up there and try to fix it. Nothing's happening, no avail. We're like, okay, guess it's time to tow it. We showed up that Wednesday, and there were 2 people there that needed something from the Father that was right there. Nothing but divine appointment. And if his truck wouldn't have broke down a week earlier and been sitting there, or that week, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have been there at the right moment for these 2 people. So find that in these hard situations or these trials or something that's happening, he still got a purpose behind it. Just be obedient to it.
Thank you, sir. Marlene, I want you to come up here, please. I want you to lead us in prayer here. Josette, it's good to see you. You're doing better, right? Good to see you. Since you have been kind of the hub of what's been going on as far as people who have needs and things, and you know what you have a hand on you know the pulse of what's going on and where we need to pray. So I want you to lead us in prayer tonight. And if there's anybody, real quick, if there's anybody that you know of that here locally that we need to be aware of the situation, if they're still sick or what have you, please let us know. In fact, just real quick, raise your hand if you're sick, somebody in your family. Well, if you're sick, you shouldn't be here. But but if somebody in your family or somebody you're close to is still ill, raise your hand so we can just know that. And because we want to make sure we keep everybody in prayer. But will you do that, Marlene? Will you just lead us tonight? All right, can we all stand?
Hallelujah. Thank you, Father. Father, I just come to you right now, and I just praise you. I praise you that you love us enough that you do not leave us where we are, but you have us on that journey, on that road, and you want to take us to places that our minds cannot even imagine. But in our flesh, sometimes we're stubborn. So, Father, I thank you that you persevere through us during these times of sickness, times of calamity, as a brother over here was speaking. And you bring us through, Father, all the time. And we are so grateful for that. We thank you, Father, for those that were sick and now they're here, they're well. We thank you for families that are not here today because they're well, but they still wanted to make sure. And they're hoping to join us on Shabbat. And I thank you for that, Father. I thank you for that wisdom that you give people when they're not feeling well to stay home and just watch on live stream. I thank you so much for that. Father, I do want to bring someone special to you, and that's Azrael's mother, Tammy Neal. When she was here, she got sick, and she is still suffering. Father, I just pray that you would just pour your oil of healing over her head, Father, and heal that lady. She is such a special lady taking care of her parents, and I love her, Father. And I just pray that you would just touch her body and heal her body. Give her the rest that she needs. Give her the nourishment that she needs, vitamins, whatever it is, Father. I just pray that you would just touch her and heal her. I pray for Bill still, who is a little bit down and out, Father. I just pray you would touch him, Father, and heal his body, Father. And Beth, complete that healing in her. And Melody, complete that healing in her, Father. And anybody else, Angelica, she's sick, Father. She's not feeling well, Father. Touch her body, Father. Touch Gabby's body, Father. I just pray that you would touch the bodies of all these that are still have this sickness lingering. But Father, I pray most of all that during this time that we are down and out, that we will seek you and find out what you are doing with us, and that we would be able to humble ourselves before you and listen to your voice and hear your voice so that we can go forward. Father, I know that you have plans for Jacob's tent, and this is the time when we have to really count the cost on what it's going to take. Are we willing to lay our lives down? Are we willing to totally be rid of self and 100% follow you? In this time, Father, I pray that each and every one that would search their hearts, Father, and find out, am I really willing to pay the price that I'm going to have to pay to go into this next season that you're bringing us in? Father, I thank you, Father, for all the warriors in this place that have prayed, all the intercessors that have prayed, everybody, Father, the shofar team, blowing those shofar at certain hours in prayer for healing for those that need healing. I thank you, Father. You are building people in this place. This place is a house of prayer. This place is a house of intercession. And I just pray, Father, that we will persevere and carry through, and that we will say, yes, Father. We give it all. We humble ourselves before you. We give it all to go on to the next season. And just like Clifford said, it's going to be a promotion. But Father, help us during the season of preparation. Just as Bill was reading and this fight went on, Father, before that, we are preparing for the battle, just like Joffrey spoke about. Father, help us, strengthen us in this time to prepare for this battle, that we will be armed, willing, and ready. So when you give the call, we're ready to go. Thank you, Father. I just pray a blessing upon each and every person here, each and every person on the live stream. And there's one other family I want to pray for. I want to pray for the family of Lorraine Hasbrook, who passed away last Friday. I pray for her family, Father. And I pray for Christine, who still is suffering. I pray that you would touch her body, Father, and heal her, Father, in Yeshua's name. I pray for this. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Marlene. Just remember, the congregation of Philadelphia were pillars in the house of God because they kept the command to persevere. So, I don't want to aggrandize anything, but I don't want to belittle anything. We're going to be put through a time when our strength is going to wane, and we're going to find ourselves weak. And I don't mean, spiritually, but we're just going to we're going to be in times where we're put to the test. But let's just remember, we persevere. We persevere. We keep going. We keep going because we can do anything through him who strengthens us, right? Amen. Everybody have a blessed night. Stay well. Get well. Greetings to everybody on the live stream. We want you guys, I hope you are all doing well. And we will see you on Shabbat. All right? All right. Good night.